All right, so who's the most hated school in the Big 12? I'm going school. I guess some of this would depend on phrasing here. How are you going to school? I'm weighted heavily toward football, but I will just say school overall. Who is the most hated Big 12 school? I've got a top 5 list here because I saw that this has become something people are doing now. Top 5 most hated in college football. So I'm narrowing it down to the Big 12. And I think I've got a controversial number 1 here. So based on what I saw earlier in the chat tonight, I think I have a controversial number 1 when I first teased this. So hang in with me. Number 5 is tough. So I will admit in doing this, I got through 4 that I think all were fair, had legitimate reason, and you guys will understand why they made the list. But I couldn't really come up with a good 5th. We kind of got stymied there. But the only thing I had, and I don't even know that this is fair, the only thing I had was I was like, well, when UCF first joined the league, the build-up period to them actually coming to the Big 12, that was a very brash, loud online fan base that very much thought it would come in and have a lot of success. And now UCF has been a bit humbled after the 2 years that they have had and having to change coaches after Gus Malzahn left, kind of a mutual parting of ways, it felt like at the end of that. And so I don't know how much of that is really still left. And I may just be too online. I see much more of the online fan bases than many of you who might be watching this video. So I went with UCF, but it's like, you had options there. If it were a couple of years ago, maybe Kansas fits in just because of the basketball program and people get annoyed with losing at Allen Fieldhouse all the time and lots of people complaining about officiating there. But it's basketball, which is weighted less heavily than football and all this. And I mean, Kansas is kind of down right now, right? Like everybody's getting their shots in now. And that's been satisfying, I think, for people over the last 2 years, the people that do hate them. And so it's not burning as bright as it would be if they were still doing their normal thing and just winning all the time. TCU fans, this is where I have to take a step back and be like, is it just that I heard so many bad, like horror stories of K-State fans traveling there the last time the Wildcats played in Fort Worth and like the students being rowdy and, throwing beer on them and just being I don't know, TCU doesn't like, maybe again, I'm just sitting here like maybe Oklahoma State's won a lot in this conference, but their fans seem pretty nice. I don't know. Mike Gundy's like a fun character. It doesn't really seem like there's a ton of Oklahoma State hate that's out there. Arizona State, if we're going by, who won the league last year. Arizona State won the league, but it's a cool story. They helped the Big 12 with some credibility by their performance in the playoffs. So I don't know. I couldn't come up with anything else there for number 5. So we're sticking with UCF, I guess, just sort of by default. And I feel like, by the way, UCF fans would kind of wear that like a badge of honor. So I don't think I'm going to take any hate myself for putting that there. Number four, we're going with Texas Tech. Going with Texas Tech here. And this one is, it's all about the Benjamins. It's all about the Benjamins. More money, more problems. You become hated. But this is another fan base that I feel like would embrace this. Look, Tech's got a lot of money, and Tech's throwing that money around. They're getting a lot of attention with this transfer portal haul that they have for this year, and deservedly so. And they've got now, a very highly publicized multi-billion-dollar booster in Cody Campbell, who's bankrolling a lot of this and funding it. And Tech fans have been celebrating their what's off this offseason. They stole a coordinator from the Big 12, hired 2 really high-profile coordinators, kept their GM away from Notre Dame. Like a lot of reasons for Tech to have some confidence and cockiness, dare I say it, by the way things have gone this offseason. But with that, you have a very, it's not a bashful fan base, a very online fan base that is very passionate, very large. And so you have a lot of online interactions where I think people have been like, damn, like, okay. Look, Tech fans have generated some hate with that. And again, badge of honor type of thing, right? Look, I will just say this. Go rewatch the scenes of like Chris Beard in Texas entering United Supermarkets Arena when his return happened, and look at that fan base and tell me that that's not a fan base that doesn't generate some hate every now and then. And I'm not saying those circumstances made sense for everybody to be really mad, but like, if you're going to be that amped up about it, like you're probably a fan base that's going to generate some hate. And I think there are some people that look at it and like, hey man, like this little yappy dog, like hasn't won 9 games in a regular season since 2009, but is so yappy. Well, this is your chance to upgrade a little bit, become a Doberman, become a Rottweiler, something like that. You can do that this year. Got the money to do it, but there's money behind the brashness of the Texas Tech fan base right now. So I go with them at number 4. Number three, I'm going to go with BYU. And this is, I think, a polarizing one because a lot of people, myself included, I very much like BYU. I have loved everybody I have met, basically, that's been associated with BYU and was treated so well when I went to the BYU K-State football game. And they're just so nice. Like, I go back to the Avery Johnson quote when they played, K-State played there. And he was like, I'm not used to like fans from the stands, like encouraging me or like complimenting me. It was weird. Just very nice people, very humble. Kalani Sitake had the opportunity in the Colorado postgame press conference after the Alamo Bowl to like make a case for why they should have been, and they objectively obviously should have been more closely considered for a playoff spot, but he just didn't do it. Like, just very humble. But at the same time, a lot of people give him hate because of the LDS tie-in, right? Like the church, I have not talked about this specifically here, but I know it's gotten plenty of run on YouTube and everywhere, like the incident in Arizona with the Mormon chant that was thrown out there by Arizona students. And I know that that's not the first time. If you just Google it, you can see that like an Oregon football game a couple of years ago, it came up as well. Like that's always going to be something that turns BYU into an easy target, I think, when they are going and playing places and just in general, people's attitude toward them in general. There's also something too. Like BYU's been really good this year. Like, they're beating everybody in basketball, and they had a terrific football season this year. Also, if I want to broaden it out a little bit more nationally, they took a lot of hate nationally as a football program this year just because people thought that they weren't very good. So I took that into consideration there too. And I do remember that, always hearing about the fact that people in the Mountain West had some hate for BYU because they got annoyed with how old the roster was with players who had been on missions. And like, I can remember hearing a little bit of that when BYU came into the Big 12, and some like warning, like, oh, they'd be a pain of a partner to deal with, the not playing on Sundays thing too. But like, I think everybody who's been paying attention would say BYU's been nothing but just a great partner. So it's basically a polarizing option there at BYU, but they have some things naturally that are always going to get them some hate. Now, number 2 and number 1, this is where the controversy comes in, folks. This is where the controversy comes in. Who's number 2 and who's number 1? I feel like most of you could probably figure out who the top 2 are that are left. I know you guys know who one of them is, and I'm going to go with them at number 2. That's Utah. I'm going with Utah at number 2. Now, Utah had a top 2 spot locked up in the top 2 most hated teams in the Big 12, like 9 months before they even stepped foot into the conference, or before the ink was dry on the paper of them coming to the Big 12, that was August of 23. That was a done deal 9 months before that because of how Utah acted in the build up to it. Not thinking the Pac-12 was going to die, fighting with Big 12 fans over that, calling it the truck stop conference, thumbing their nose at the entire league in general. Then you transition into, all right, they're actually coming here, and it amplifies into a swell of like, well, we're going to dominate this conference. We will run the Big 12. We're picked to win the Big 12 in the league preseason poll because we are just going to rule the roost here. You guys are just a bunch of schlubs here in the Big 12. That attitude was everywhere. Then Utah goes 5-7. And I think the thing that contributed more than anything was the performance that Mark Harlan had in his post-game press conference after the Holy War this year, where he not only goes after the officiating, but particularly the part where he said, hey, we were excited about being in the Big 12, but I'm not excited today. That little quip at the Big 12, I think, drove more hatred for Utah than anything there. So you got this combination of like fans who are way too cocky and then also pretentious. And that's what has made Utah so hated. And then you have the athletic director going out of his way. This was not like some pre-scheduled press conference, going out of his way to take a mic and then kind of just breathe life into this whole attitude that the fan base has had before. So yeah, I think about Texas and this like pretentious attitude that Texas had, like we're better than you. Definitely some of that with Utah. Now, having said all of that, I know you're all sitting around like, hey, man, like, how is that not number one? How is that not number one? You guys are all wrong, by the way, in the chat. You guys are all wrong. Your guesses are the most wrong. And I don't think you're going to think this is that stupid when you hear who it is. Because the difference between my number 2 and number 1 here is that Utah is the most hated school within the confines of the Big 12. If we were doing like a straw poll of Big 12 fans, I think Utah would win handily. But if we were doing a straw poll of people nationally and said, hey, which school do you hate most in the Big 12? Who's the most hated school in the Big 12? Nationally, that is Colorado. Okay. So it's a tough decision between 1 and 2, but I literally went with like the sheer volume of haters. And if we're talking about the sheer volume of haters, there are far more Colorado haters nationally than there are Utah haters nationally. So that is why you go with Colorado. I think you guys know the obvious here, right? Like Coach Prime, very much a lightning rod figure. Lots of people hate his attitude, how he conducted himself coming in right away and saying, hey, you guys are leaving. I'm bringing my luggage and it's Louis, like get out of here. Going crazy in the transfer portal. Basically he was just a disruptor, and disrupting the status quo in college football is going to get you a lot of hate. It's going to get you a lot of love too. And again, when we talk about polarizing, Colorado definitely fits the bill there. Very polarizing, very, very polarizing. And so because of that, they're number 1. Not only that, people then hated, okay, we gave this program way too much attention based on what they were, especially in year 1. I guess they were technically in the Pac-12 then, but gave this program too much attention for what they are. People get annoyed with that. It's like Notre Dame, people get annoyed with that year in, year out sometimes. Obviously not this year as they made it to the national championship game, but some years like, why are we paying so much attention to them? They're not that good. And the other thing is to kind of the cherry on top with this was just the Heisman. I mean, how much hate was there for Travis Hunter getting the Heisman over Ashton Genty? There was a lot. That discussion got very contentious by the end of the season. So I'll throw in here too. I see some of the comments like, wow, this is really, people hate Coach Prime, not Colorado. I mean, they hated Travis Hunter by the end of it too, which is sad because it was such a phenomenal player and it had to turn into a this or that thing with him and Ashton Genty. But there was a lot of hate there for just the whole operation. Shador, we still have, go look at the comments when you see somebody produce a report about what someone in the NFL thinks about Shador Sanders. They had a lot of figures that were making people hate them. I think it's fair to say that Colorado would be number 1 right now. So nationally, number 1 Colorado. Big 12 wise, you would go number 1 Utah. But for the purpose of this list, I go with number 1 Colorado. But let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments what your list would be. Am I right? Am I wrong there?